Today is Friday, according to my math, and that means that I should be doing a video to put up on the vault. I don't know why. I keep thinking today's Sunday. I was about to do a live stream, and I'm like, wait, no. Today's Friday. Vault. Sunday, live stream. Got it. Okay. Couple things. First of all, I got to tell you, a couple days ago, I wore on camera a shirt that said Future Islands. Very, very hard to read until you really focused on it. Future Islands is a band. Went and saw them perform here in Detroit recently. Amazing show. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check them out. Look up Future Islands and Letterman, and you'll find the first appearance they did on television, which became viral, and they're a fabulous band. The lead singer is, for lack of a better word, he's a trip. I can't describe what he does on stage while he sings, but it's quite clear that he's very emotional and wrapped up in his music. And of course, as a songwriter, you can do that when you're performing your own stuff. And so he's running around the stage, jumping around. I mean, just an amazing, amazing performer, amazing show. They got a lot of great songs I like. Had a great time. I was about 10 feet from the stage again. In fact, I was standing almost in the exact same spot where I was when the guy collapsed next to me at the Gary Newman Ministry show a while back. And don't think it was lost on me that was the night that the woodchuck got in my garage. So I was heading out to go down to Royal Oak to see Future Islands. My first thought was, I wonder how secure that garage is. And are the woodchucks onto my concert schedule just yet? So that was Future Islands. I saw them, like I said, wonderful show. They come near you, check them out, and you might enjoy it too. But I got a note today. And I had said I'm not going to do videos about notes I get because I think a lot of people are messing with me. But I actually got one where I think the guy was serious. But a guy sent me a note and he said, Steve, he goes, you were talking about whether or not there are windows in courtrooms. And don't get me going on this, but somebody accused me of being a liar because I had said that I'd seen something happen in a courtroom and we all watched out the window as something was happening. And somebody commented and said, Steve, you're obviously making that story up because as we know, courtrooms don't have windows. As a general proposition, that's a hard and fast rule. 2 + 2 always equals 4. All courtrooms are windowless. That's what the guy said. And I said, that's a strange thing to say, considering I've been in many, many courtrooms that have got windows. I can give you examples of entire courthouses where every single courtroom is windows. The only real question is whether or not the jurors are looking out the window or whether the judge is or. So think of a courtroom, assuming it's roughly a four-sided proposition, right? Usually rectangular in nature, that if the judge is here and the jury is here and windows are here, the windows would be behind the jurors. If the jurors are over here, it'd be distracting because they'd be looking out the window most of the time. And I also seen it where the window is in the back of the courtroom. And I can actually think of examples. And in fact, the story I told about the woman who came into court for a driving while license suspended, pled guilty, told the judge she has to get some stuff done before she can get her license reinstated. And then we all watched her as she went out, and then we watched her go across the parking lot, get in her car, and drive off. And that's one. Likewise, the guy who was the flight risk, who took off running when he heard that his bail was going to be something he couldn't afford, we watched them drag him back through the snow because there's a whole wall of windows on this side of the courtroom. And by the way, in that courtroom, I can remember vividly that the jurors sat here with the window basically right there. And so, the guy who sent me the note this morning actually said, Steve, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And then he attached a blueprint or an overhead schematic of what a courtroom could look like. And he said, every courtroom I've ever been in looked exactly like this. And I don't know if it's his drawing or he pulled it from someplace, but it had some obvious mistakes in it, which I'm not going to get into because I don't have a copy that I can show you. But the funny part was to say that every courtroom I've been in looked like this. Unless you're an attorney or a repeat offender, I'm not sure how many courtrooms the average person has been in. And I started doing the math thinking, how many courtrooms have I been in? It's easily over 100. Because I've been in state courts, federal courts. I've been in the state district courts. I've been in the state circuit courts. I've been in the state courts of appeal. I've also been in the state Supreme Court, actually being in courtrooms, okay? And the idea that every single courtroom in the universe, well, let's say America, every single American courtroom is identical, is nonsense. And so I was trying to think of what the strangest courtrooms I've ever been in were. And I can think of two right off the bat just to show you that there are examples that always screw things up for people who make grandiose statements where everything is this. Everything is everything. I think that's a song. However, I'll give you one example and I'll give you another example. First example, I remember going to represent somebody on a drunk driving case out in the middle of nowhere. I'm talking about a courthouse I'd never been in before, but out in the middle of nowhere. And the court notice had an address on it. So I punch the address in, I drive, and I pull up in front of what appears to be a former mechanic repair shop, an actual place they worked on cars, automotive repair, but not a gas station, but a building that had big doors on it. And when you went inside, there were cement floors. It was the weirdest thing. And they had repurposed it partially, like they'd actually done some things to put a bench in and some chairs in one room that was the courtroom. And when the judge came in, there was a court reporter typing away, and there were flags and the state seal of Michigan and the name of the judge on the bench. But to go talk to the prosecutor, you go back into the room where the lifts for the cars were, and they were still there. The guy's sitting at a card table, and he goes, what's your case? I tell him. We sat down, we worked out a deal. Went back and put it on the record. And I asked the prosecutor, I go, dude, what's the deal with this courthouse? And he goes, we're building another one right now. And so we had to, and I forgot what the circumstances were. This is a long time ago. I drove to this court in my Jeep, which places it about 1994 or 5, so a while back. But there was some circumstance where they did not have a courthouse and they were building one, or they were refurbishing or doing something. And they thought, well, we can use this building temporarily. It was a temporary stopgap measure. That building had not only windows, it had lifts in the floor to pick up cars. Okay, so that was probably the weirdest courtroom I've ever been in. However, another example, Plymouth District Court years ago had a fire, burned the courthouse to the ground. I mean, we're talking about a total destruction of a courthouse by fire. And I remember at the time it was a big deal in the legal community because there are some cases that are time sensitive, such that if you get arrested for drunk driving, the statute says that you must be arraigned in this period of time and you must be put on trial in this period of time. So people can't drag them out, okay? And when they first passed that law, they didn't put in exceptions for emergencies such as if the courtroom burns down or the courthouse burns down. And so I remember hearing stories about guys who had filed documents to defend somebody in a drunk driving case in that courthouse. And they had not gotten all their records like they're supposed to off-site. You're supposed to have the stuff backed up somewhere just in case. Well, guess what? Just in case happened, and it was bad. So I don't remember what happened to those cases. It doesn't matter. But I had a case that was set to go shortly after that fire in that courthouse. So I got the notice to appear. It's a standard SCAO form called notice to appear. And it has across the top the address of where the hearing will be held and the courthouse address. And in this case, it goes, go to this address. I go to the address, and there is what used to be a vacant lot. I'm guessing it's owned by the city. And on that vacant lot are a bunch of those like trailer, or I don't even call them, but the units they use, like if you go by a construction site, they'll often have this thing that the offices are in where the important people can sit down and talk, go over stuff, talk to people, and stay out of the weather. And you've also seen similar things to this at a lot of schools that run into classroom issues, but temporary ones. They'll bring in these units that can be used as temporary classrooms. And so it was a conglomeration of those things that were connected together. And I remember showing up going, what? And there was a sign that said, this is the temporary site of the district court. And walking up, going inside, and there's someone sitting at a desk who's the clerk who says, yeah, what are you here for? Oh, okay, you're checking in. And I don't remember if that courthouse had more than one judge in it or not, but I remember sitting in one of those, trailers, units, what do you want to call it, sitting there and then waiting to go talk to a prosecutor, same things before, and then going and putting something on the record and walking around inside this extremely makeshift courthouse, for lack of a better word. And remember, it's a court. If the judge is there, state seal, it's being recorded, people are being sworn, it's a court. It's a court. And so the idea that, no, every single court in America has this blueprint and they all follow it. And one of the things I wrote back to the person I said, by the way, just so you know, the idea that every courtroom fits this exact schematic that you gave me. That courtroom showed room for 16 jurors, which would be like felony trials. But in Michigan, district courts often hear misdemeanor cases, which would only have 6 jurors deliberating. And so with alternates, it's usually 8. And you might go, but Steve, come on, 8 to 16 is not that big of a deal. Well, no, the reason I'm mentioning that is a lot of district courts in Michigan also double as city council chambers. So you go to a city that has its own district court, because not all district courts line up perfectly with a city. There's some district courts that have several municipalities that they represent, but some of them are purely like, this is just a district court, and it happens to be for the city of such and such, but it's got a designation, 52-4, 53-1, whatever it might be. And so a lot of the city municipal chambers double as district courts. And I've actually walked into a district court before and went and sat down in the courtroom, and the judge isn't on the bench yet. And there's a thing up there, and it goes, Mayor so-and-so. And I'm like, okay. The judge walks out and goes, oh, picks up that nameplate, puts it down, puts his nameplate down, the Honorable so-and-so. And so those courtrooms are configured dual purpose. And so many of them can easily be turned into a courtroom or into a council chambers. But the big difference is simply that they didn't lay it out and say, we'll design this and construct this as a courtroom. It's, we're going to design and construct this as a council chambers. And council chambers usually has a larger thing at the front because there's a bunch of people up there, not just the mayor. And then it's usually got a lectern where people can come up and bitch. And then they can put council tables here, and of course they can make double use out of that. But oftentimes the jury boxes and the juror seats are an afterthought. And I've seen it before. In fact, the first case I ever tried myself of a jury trial, the very first one was, and again, this was not a situation where it was city council chambers, but it was simply a room in a building that housed several other municipal functions. And I kid you not, when there was a trial going on in this one judge's courtroom, they'd bring in folding chairs and put them up against the wall. And guess what that wall was? It was windows. And so there were seats in that room. I'm not even sure what the room was used normally for. And there was simply a desk at the front. The judge sat at a desk. It wasn't a big old bench or anything like that. But there were flags in there and a state seal. And when the judge came out, we all stood up and we all sat down when he told us we could. And a court reporter and a bailiff and all that stuff. But you could tell that room was not a courtroom 365.25 days a year. It was being used for other purposes, and there were, sadly, jurors sitting on folding chairs. Yes. So the idea that every courtroom in America is laid out the same, no. And the idea that, like, well, I've seen courtrooms that are all this way, unless you've seen hundreds of them, I'm not really sure that you can make this statement and have it have anything real deeply authoritative about it. But be that as it may, you're a sample of one. And I'm saying one person. And I'm telling you right now that when I've talked about this issue before, I've mentioned it to other attorneys, and they just start laughing. They're going, somebody's messing with you. They've got to be, there's no way on earth that somebody believes that there is not a courtroom in Michigan with a window in it. But then again, here we are discussing this, and quite frankly, I said I wouldn't do this again. So again, I'm going to play this by ear. Do I think the person's serious or not? I think they were, but if they weren't, hey, you got me. But I've seen people crack jokes before, and everybody looks at them like, what? Oh, I'm joking. There's a thing about something not being a joke and something being a joke. And if you put something right here and you go, well, it was supposed to be a joke, the moment you tell us that it has to be a joke or supposed to be a joke kind of takes away from the fact that it wasn't that funny. So I apologize, but then again, I do know there's people out there who just enjoy hearing me talk about something and later go, oh, I was just kidding. So, well, like I said, I'm pretty certain today's Fridays, which means I will see you again on Sunday at the live stream. Please drop in from 1 till 3 Eastern time on the main channel, not here in the vault. Questions or comments, put them below those. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.